and a warm welcome to The Big Picture. I'm NEELU VYAS. In a significant development on the Afghan reconciliation process, Russia today hosted the Moscow format meeting in which 11 countries, including the regional players like China, Pakistan and Iran, took part. But what was worth noticing for the first time was the public entry of Taliban at the multilateral table. These talks come after years of back-channel diplomacy between Moscow and Taliban. India was part of this format meeting, but at an unofficial level, represented by two of its former diplomats. What's the significance of these peace talks? What's the impact it will have on India? And where do these peace negotiations position Moscow vis-a-vis Washington? All this and much more with a special panel on today's Big Picture. I'll introduce you to them. VYVEK KATJU, former ambassador, who has closely observed the developments and diplomacy in Afghanistan. Next to him is TYAL, former diplomat again, and an expert voice on Russian affairs. And next to him is AKHILEsh SUMAN, who is the foreign affairs editor at Rajya Sabha Television. I welcome all of you on the show. And I'll start with you, Mr. KATJU, that would like to understand from you that what's the real significance of this meeting which is happening in Moscow?
I think you put it very well that the Taliban will be, as a delegation, on the table along with people who are part of the official Afghan system, that is the High Peace Council, and with important neighboring countries of Afghanistan and important regional countries, including us. So this will be an opportunity for the region to interact with not only the government of Afghanistan, in a sense that the High Peace Council will, I am sure, articulate the views of the government of Afghanistan, but also here, and I hope the Taliban come out forthrightly, hear what the Taliban have to say about peacemaking in Afghanistan. So it is a significant meeting, and hopefully it will take the process of normalizing the situation in Afghanistan forward, at least start it, because Afghanistan has been going through a particularly violent period over the past few months.
Right. But Mr. Tal, what has really changed that the countries now have an appetite to engage with Taliban? Maybe at an unofficial level or at an official level, we're not getting into that. But we see a certain appetite on the parts of countries, maybe like India, maybe like US as well. Russia, of course, is hosting the summit, but there is a certain appetite to host Taliban as well, considering it as an important stakeholder. And so far, we saw that there was a certain hesitation and reservation when it came to the engagement with Taliban.
See, this is now almost the 17th year of the world's fight against Taliban. And if you see over the last few years, the influence of Taliban is increasing. They have an unending supply of fighters from the madrasas and masjids of Afghanistan and Pakistan. They have unlimited funds because the poppy and all that narcotics that is rising by all indicators if you take the UN figures. And they think that time is on their side.
Right.
Whereas there is fatigue on the other side, whether it is the United States, whether it is the neighboring countries. So we see that the acceptance of Taliban is increasing, and all the countries who earlier thought that Taliban can be totally marginalized and eliminated from the polity of Afghanistan, they are having second thoughts. Even United States, the special envoy Zalmi Khalilzad, he has been meeting the Taliban representatives in Doha, Qatar. Every other country, except perhaps India, has opened some kind of a channel with Taliban. There is talk of good Taliban, bad Taliban, then ISIL came into the picture. A lot of people thought that it's better to have Taliban rather than ISIL. In Tashkent, there was a conference in March where Uzbekistan tried to take the lead, and the conclusion was that everybody has to talk to Taliban.
Right.
And Uzbekistan also offered that it can organize talks between Taliban and Afghanistan. So the realization has happened that Taliban is a force which cannot be eliminated, cannot be fought,
cannot be ignored,
and somehow cannot be ignored. So somehow they have to be brought in the peace process. But whether what Taliban see for themselves in it, when they think that in course of time they will have entire Afghanistan under control, it is for them to say. in this meeting today
Right.
in Moscow.
But Akhilesh, when it comes to the participation of India, we've read reports that India is participating at an unofficial level.
Right.
Now, how does it unfold when the meeting is underway? How does it unfold for India?
Yeah, actually it is not unofficial, it is like non-official. What they are telling it is non-official, and non-official means that no policy implementer, no policy maker is going into that meeting. No officer from South Block, serving officer from South Block is going. But as far as ICW is concerned, ICW is a government Ministry of External Affairs controlled organization, and also RIS, where Mr. Amar Sinha is there. Amar Sinha is also, RIS is also government, government funded, and it works in close cooperation with the government, and Mr. Raghavan, ICW Director General. So, Government of India is not shying away for. Government of India's position is that what Afghan government feels comfortable about us. It is very clear that we want Afghan-led, Afghan-controlled regime, so an Afghan-owned. So, in that way, Indian government is telling that Afghanistan is also not sending official representative. So, we are also not sending official representative. It is like a close coordination with the Afghanistan government. And you know that in China, when we are also working very close, and we have Prime Minister Narendra Modi told that India and China should also work, and first initiative came about diplomatic training of the Afghan officials. So, in a way, India is trying to be engaged in every decision that world is going to take about Afghanistan, and that is the whole effort. That when in April last year there was a first Moscow format summit, and in that meeting we had sent our official representative Deepak Mittal, who is the joint secretary. He led the delegation. But now, since Afghanistan is not sending official delegation, we are not sending official delegation, and once the time comes that official delegation will be comfortable, Afghanistan will be comfortable with our official delegation, we will send it.
Okay. But in this entire picture, when this multilateral meeting is taking place, how do we see America positioning itself? Because the American official, the embassy official who is there in the capacity of an observer. Now, what does that really mean? He is, of course, in the official capacity, but is he going to take notes of what is happening? I mean, would like to understand from you.
Look, observers, as the word indicates, observe. So they take notes, they brief their governments, but the important thing is that they are present there.
Okay.
They are not boycotting the meeting. Let us understand the Afghan situation. The Afghan situation indicates that, to my mind, that there are really a few principal players who are involved in the process and who will necessarily play a leading role in peacemaking efforts.
Okay.
First of all, it is the government of Afghanistan. Second are the insurgents or the terrorists, because Taliban are, at the end of the day, they have been adopting terrorist methods too. So there is the Taliban. The next are the Americans. The Americans have people, today I think they have something like 14,000 soldiers on the ground. No other country has that number of troops. So they are principal players. And lastly, it is Pakistan. Because Pakistan has kept the insurgency going.
Right.
We can't avoid that. They have given sanctuaries to the Taliban and they've kept this entire process going.
Right.
Now, the other countries have a vital stake in Afghanistan's stabilization, so including Russia. And it is Russia and the other countries who are saying that, look, while the principal game may be played in an arena which is different, but we also have a stake in this process and we cannot be ignored. We want to at least be participants in the larger peacemaking process in Afghanistan.
Right.
Now, where does India come in? India is a very significant player in Afghanistan. There was a time, which I recollect, in fact, I was in the ministry then, and I used to see this. There was a time when, under Pakistan's pressure, the international community used to keep India out of peacemaking processes in Afghanistan. In the 1990s, we had we weren't invited. Our our role was on the ground in Afghanistan and it was very effective. But this time, the very fact that we are present, and it is important for India to be just present. The message is that we are present.
Present there.
The Indian flag is there and there are representatives behind the Indian flag. Shows that the international community today has accepted that India has a role in the peacemaking process in Afghanistan, notwithstanding whatever Pakistan may want.
Right.
And that is a huge step forward as far as our diplomacy is concerned.
Absolutely. But that brings me to the question, Mr. TYAL, that of course America is there in the capacity of an observer, and Taliban's consistent stand has been that, you know, the presence of the American troops has been a major obstacle in the entire Afghan peace process. So when Taliban doesn't at all acknowledge the US presence, are we really going to see significant outcomes from this whole peace process which is happening? What about the breakthroughs? Are we really going to have something significant coming out of the meeting?
It depends on what exactly is the future of Afghanistan, what is the vision for a future of Afghanistan, which all these 11 countries which are participating in whatever capacity have. Now, Russia will certainly not want a Afghanistan, future Afghanistan, which is a hotbed of terrorism, Islamic fundamentalism, etc. Iran will not like a very Sunni dominated kind of a polity, and earlier they had all kinds of difficulties with Taliban when they're in Mazar Sharif, their consulate people were killed. India would like to see a modern, progressive Afghanistan, a secular Afghanistan with women's rights, etc. Same with America. Now, how do you reconcile all that? And perhaps India's presence and message to all the others would be that if you concede to Taliban, you will ultimately, it will revert to what Afghanistan was under Taliban, and it will again become a fountainhead of terrorism, Islamic fundamentalism, etc. for the region, and ably abetted and aided by Pakistan. So I also don't see what is the common ground among all the participating countries, and what is the future of the Ghani government, because I think a lot of people think, including lots of American strategic thinkers, that if America withdraws, that will be the first demand of Taliban, that the foreign forces withdraw.
And for which America is not ready right now.
It's not ready yet, but they can promise something that, okay, no, we will not harm your interests, etc., and they will backtrack. So whether they can they are dependable. But in my view, Taliban and ideology is not like cancer, that it can be confined to one body.
Right.
It's like plague. Whichever is touching that body, they will also get infected. And I think that message our interlocutors should give to all the 11.
Right.
So
if we are not expecting any major outcomes from this peace process, so it's more about posturing. Now, when you talk about AKHILESH posturing, then of course how Moscow is taking a leadership position in trying to become a mediator between the Afghan government and the Taliban, and then of course at the same time they are also playing to the war-weary voters, because Afghanistan is going to elections in 2019. So in that perspective, really, how do you really see Moscow taking a lead then?
Actually, Moscow is not taking the lead, because Moscow has always been thinking in a way that my interests are very much intact in Afghanistan. What was the interest, their earlier interest? Because Moscow is a very major regional player in that area. America came and that whole...
Why I said Moscow was because even Washington was trying to do so, but it failed on various counts.
Yeah, because Moscow is a regional player. Moscow is a regional player, and now you can understand that Moscow and Beijing are working quite closely together. And once you see that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also talking to China and Russia also on this Afghanistan peace process. And India has always been telling that there should be a regional solution of this whole process, because you know that when Americans came, the whole region was in jeopardy, and it was the American who destroyed the whole fabric of Afghanistan. because Afghanistan before America came, it was growing in a different way, but it was not a brutal society. But after Americans came, it became a brutal and cruel society. So India also favors that there should be a regional solution, and that is why India has been in constant talk with Ashraf Ghani. And when Ashraf Ghani came to India recently, he didn't talk officially in the official meeting, unofficial briefing, but when he was talking to eminent citizens of Delhi in Leela Palace Hotel, he has hinted enough that we have to talk to Taliban, we have to talk to local people, because they are holding the guns in their hand, and we have to snatch or we have to take the guns from them. So India has been telling that we will be cautioning you that okay, this is a dangerous path, but if you think by all your might and all your wisdom, okay, this is the path you want to follow, we will be with you.
But
so this is India's position.
So Ambassador KATJU, do you also think that it's some kind of a political posturing by Ashraf Ghani, given the fact that elections are around the corner?
No, Ashraf Ghani had indicated to the Taliban, you'll recollect some months ago, that he was willing to have the Taliban open an office in Kabul, a political office. He was also willing to put the presence of foreign troops within the agenda of the intra-Afghan dialogue.
Right.
So, at the end of the day, the region wants peace in Afghanistan, but the region cannot create peace. All it can do is not play the role of spoilers. The peacemaking has to be done by the Afghan parties themselves. No one else can do it.
Right.
The difficulty is Pakistan. What is the stand that the Pakistanis want to take? Why am I saying this? Because that is the country that has kept the Taliban going, that has kept the insurgency going.
Right.
Now, the Americans too, despite all their posturing under Trump, have come to sort of have laid down their arms before the Pakistanis. They said the Pakistanis are duplicitous and they warned the Pakistanis. The Pakistanis have absorbed all that and continued on their merry path. So today, the principal game, as I said, on negotiations, it has to be played by the parties that are there, which are most influential. The rest can only play a complementary role. And I look upon the Moscow process as a complementary role.
Okay.
Yes, the Americans are there. Why? Because the region can, and Russia and China can create difficulties. They don't want them to create difficulties. So they are saying that you want to assist in the peacemaking process, be there. Our presence there is to indicate that we are an independent player.
Right.
Our connections are with the people of Afghanistan, with the legitimate government of Afghanistan. If the legitimate government of Afghanistan doesn't have a problem in talking to the Taliban in an international setting, why should we? And besides, as I'm sure Skand will agree with me, the diplomatic game is played in this way.
Right.
You can't isolate yourself and say, I will not be there because I don't like the other party. As far as the Taliban's ideology is concerned, we don't have to endorse it. We don't have to say anything about the ideology.
Right. But if it's a complementary peace process, as Ambassador KATJU just mentioned, so you also have the primary players sitting at that table. They might not say anything, but are we going to see where Taliban apparently will list out its demands, maybe a stepwise thing, step 1, step 2, step 3? So are we going to expect something like that, maybe a written document or maybe some kind of an official address to the media? Will there be some kind of a message from the Taliban side?
If Taliban make some kind of a statement, I think it will be looked at with great care by all the countries. And they have already said that they will not negotiate.
Right.
Their delegation, 5 members who are coming from Doha, they will not negotiate. So it will only be some kind of a peace process. They have said that they will say whatever they want to say about the peace process. And also they have in that statement from Doha said about the presence of foreign troops, that is the hurdle in the peace process. So it is very clear what their demand would be, that first the foreign troops should move out, and as soon as the foreign troops move out, then Ghani government cannot survive. So let us see. I don't expect much outcome from this, except some statement of positions, and America and the principal players as Ambassador KATJU very rightly said, that ultimately it is the principal players, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Taliban and United States.
Right.
They always have, can talk to each other. So they don't need Russia to talk to each other.
And this is, if I may add, this is not a negotiating forum.
It is not a negotiation.
This is not something, and I don't expect that the Taliban will give a statement here which will show that everything is hunky-dory. No,
Not at all.
they will state their position. The important thing is that the meeting itself is taking place. There are these countries, the Americans are observers, and the Afghans are there, and the Taliban.
Right.
So for the Taliban, it's a step forward. I mean, that can't be denied. And what makes me happy is that we are now part of this process, because I have memories when we were kept out of it.
Okay. So, Akhilesh, when you talk about these principal players, and of course they can talk to each other directly, as Ambassador TYAL just mentioned. So, how does one see, I mean, the impact on countries like Pakistan, impact on countries like India, where of course we are there diplomatically, we are making our presence felt. But how, in the long run, how does it impact on countries like India and Pakistan?
Actually, peace in Afghanistan is very important for us, because if there is peace in Afghanistan, the way we are trying to develop Chabahar port, and we want to give access to our goods to Afghanistan and then to other Central Asian countries. So it will be very important for us, because if there is no peace in Afghanistan, we cannot make our strategy successful in this region. And that is why I will remind you that when sanctions were put on import, while import, it was also when India was was given waiver. The American spokesperson also told that waiver is also on Iran, Chabahar port. So America is also trying to see us in that region in effective way, because we were always arguing that, see, Chabahar port is not important for just India. Chabahar is important for the world. If India is there, the whole democratic world is there.
Right.
If India is not there, only Pakistan and China is there. So this is your choice.
But I have also read articles where it's mentioned that, you know, there's some kind of a heartburn on the part of the Americans that why Russia is convening this meeting. So how would you really endorse
Look,
that?
the Russians are a major power in the world. The Russians have interests in Afghanistan. They kept themselves aloof for a long time.
Right.
Then they started playing a game from behind the scenes. For some years now, they've come out in the open, and they can't be ignored. And the Americans are wise to be there, to my mind, to be there as observers, because, as I said, you can't at this stage. If you have countries putting obstacles in the peace process, then the entire American game and the Ghani government game will fall. So you've got to carry everyone along,
Right.
and that is perhaps the attempt here.
So you would not, Ambassador TYAL, you would not see this as a situation where America is ceding the space and probably Kremlin or Moscow, they are just grabbing onto the opportunity. You wouldn't see it like that.
No, but Russia is trying to get into some space where it was not there.
Yeah.
And they have some Ambassador Kabulov, he has been going here and there making all kinds of statements, and he has been going to Pakistan also and having olive branch to Pakistan. So lots of things are happening. So Russia is trying to regain some kind of influence in Afghanistan, of course, through Central Asia. And directly, and America would not like it, because after all, America has really paid in blood and sweat and money in Afghanistan. Of course, they created the problem, as was said, by having this Taliban, etc. During the Russian occupation.
No, but they didn't create the Taliban, Skand.
Taliban were created by, but they were funded by America and Saudi Arabia.
I'll give you the last word.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead, sir.
No, but it is wrong to say that the Taliban were created by the Americans. Yes, the Mujahideen were there. The Taliban were there. The Taliban, if anything, were Pakistan's
umbrella
creatures.
Mujahideen, but umbrella was Mujahideen, but Taliban were a component which were funded by America, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan acting in concert.
When did America fund the Taliban? I mean, that is...
Through ISI.
Okay, so I think how Taliban was created...
Listen, I have what the Taliban, where the Americans were Some Americans were negotiating with the Taliban was for a pipeline, the Tapi
that's
pipeline.
How Taliban was
that is
created, who
different.
funded
I mean,
it, let's
this
keep it
is-
for another
this
day,
is-
for another
But
discussion.
I'll just add one thing that it is that Americans were also eager to send non-official delegation in this meet. But it was rather persuasion of Russia that please send an official person. So America agreed to it. So it is not that America and Russia are totally opposed to this meet.
Okay.
Both are going in tandem. To some extent, they want that some solutions should be found out. Even if Pakistan needs to be cowed down, it has to be cowed down, and that is why China is also wishing that if China's Belt and Road Initiative has to go further, they need some sort of peace in the whole region. But who will be the leader? It will be decided later, but I think Afghanistan will be the leader after all.
Okay, so all eyes would be on what the Afghan government has to say. But yes, significant breakthroughs out of this Moscow format meeting may not be visible very soon, but it certainly showcases Russia's entry into peace efforts after failed bids by the United States and others to help negotiate an end to the 17-year war. 11 countries at the negotiating table, considering Taliban as an important stakeholder, is certainly a step forward in the overall peace process of the region. Thanks to all my guests, Ambassador KATJU, Ambassador TYAL and AKHILESH. It was a pleasure having you on the program. So that's it on this episode of Big Picture. See you with another episode on Monday. Goodbye and thanks for watching.